Duck and the Diesel Engine by the Reverend W. Audrey. Read and adapted by Joshua Boston. Domeless Engines. It was an important and busy day on the island of Sodor. Everyone was very busy and excited, making notes and taking photographs. A special visitor had arrived with a very special train and was now the center of attention. Sir Topham Hatt welcomed the passengers, who looked at everything in the yard and photographed all the engines. Duck's driver let some of them ride in his cab. "They're the Railway Society," he explained. "They've come to see us." "Who is the engine?" asked Thomas. "That," said Duck, "is a celebrity." "A what?" asked Percy. "A celebrity is a famous engine or person," explained Duck. "Indeed," said his driver. "The engine is City of Truro. He was the first engine to go over 100 miles an hour. Let's get finished, and then we can talk to him." "Oh," said Duck, awed. "I've heard about him." "He's probably too famous to notice any of us," added Thomas. "Rubbish, Thomas," laughed Duck's driver. Just then Gordon arrived. "Pugh," said Gordon. "Who cares? A lot of fuss about nothing, if you ask me." And he steamed away. The engines took no notice. A little later, Duck found City of Truro at the coaling stage. "May I talk to you?" he asked shyly.
"Of course,"
smiled the famous engine.
"I see you are one of us."
"I do try to teach my friends here our ways," said Duck modestly. "All ship-shape and Swindown fashion, that's right. Please, could you tell me how you beat the Southwestern?" So, City of Truro told Duck all about his famous run from Plymouth to Bristol long, long ago. They were soon firm friends, and talked Great Western till late at night. The other engines found that City of Truro wasn't conceited at all. He enjoyed talking to all of them and recounting his greatest adventures. City of Truro left early next morning. Everyone wished him safe travels, except for Gordon. He was still complaining. "Good riddance," he grumbled. "Chattering all night, keeping important engines awake. Who is he anyway?" "Duck told you," replied Thomas. "He's City of Truro. He's famous." "As famous as me? Nonsense." "He's famouser than you," said Duck. "He went 100 miles an hour before you were even drawn or thought of." "Ha! So he says," puffed Gordon darkly. "But I didn't like his looks. He's got no dome. Never trust domeless engines. They're not respectable. I never boast," he continued modestly, "but I'd say 100 miles an hour would be easy for me. Goodbye." Presently, Duck took some freight cars to Edward's station. He was cross, and it was lucky for those freight cars they didn't try any tricks. "Hello," called Edward. "The famous City of Truro came through this morning. He whistled to me. Wasn't he kind?" "He's the finest engine in the world," replied Duck, and he told Edward about City of Truro and what Gordon had said. "Don't take any notice," soothed Edward. "He's just jealous. He thinks that no engine should be famous but him. Look, he's coming now." Gordon's boiler seemed to have swollen larger than ever. He was running very fast. He swayed up and down from side to side as his wheels pounded the rails. "He did it, I'll do it. He did it, I'll do it," he panted. Gordon's train rocketed past and was gone. Edward chuckled and winked at Duck. "Gordon's trying to do a City of Truro," he said. Duck was still cross. "I should think he'll knock himself to bits," he snorted. "I heard something rattle as he went through." Gordon's driver eased him off. "Steady, boy," he said. "We aren't running a race." "We are, then," said Gordon, but he said it to himself. "I've never known him to ride so roughly before," remarked his driver. His fireman grabbed the brake handle to steady himself. "He's giving himself a hammering and no mistake." Soon, Gordon began to feel a little queer. "The top of my boiler seems funny," he thought. "It's just as if something was loose. I'd better go slower." But by then, it was too late. they met the wind on the viaduct. It wasn't just a gentle wind, nor was it a hard, steady wind. It was a teasing wind which blew suddenly in hard puffs and caught you unawares. Gordon thought it wanted to push him off the bridge. "No, you don't," he said firmly. But the wind had other ideas. It curled around his boiler, crept underneath his loose dome, and lifted it off and away into the valley below, where it fell onto the rocks with a clang. Gordon was most uncomfortable. The cold wind was whistling through the hole where his dome should be, and he felt silly without it. Besides, people laughed at him as he passed. And at the big station, the freight cars laughed at him. Gordon tried to whisk the people in freight cars away, but they crowded around him no matter what he did. On the way back home to the shed, he wanted his driver to stop and find his dome, and was very cross when he wouldn't. "We'll never find it now," said the driver. "You'll have to go to the works for a new one." "Oh, the indignity," sighed Gordon. "I hope the shed is empty tonight." But all the engines were there waiting. "Never trust domeless engines," said a voice from somewhere behind him. "They aren't respectable." Pop goes the diesel. City of Truro's visit had made Duck very proud of being Great Western. He talked endlessly about it. But he worked hard, too, and made everything run like clockwork. The cars behaved well, the coaches were ready on time, and the passengers even stopped grumbling. But the other engines didn't like having to bustle about. "There are only two ways of doing things," Duck told them proudly. "The Great Western way or the wrong way. I'm Great Western, and don't we know it?" they groaned. The engines were glad when a visitor came one day. He purred smoothly towards them. Sir Topham Hatt climbed down and introduced him. "This here is Diesel. I have agreed to give him a trial. He needs to learn, so please teach him, Duck." "Good morning," purred Diesel in an oily voice. "Pleased to meet you, Duck. Is that James, and Gordon, and Henry too? I am delighted to meet such famous engines. Yes." And he purred towards them. The silly engines were flattered. "He has really good manners," they murmured. "Oh, we are all very pleased to have him in our yard." But Duck had his doubts. "Come on then," he said shortly. "Oh, yes," said Diesel. "The yard, of course. Excuse me, engines." And he purred after Duck, talking hard. "You're worthy, Fat." "Sir Topham Hatt to you," ordered Duck. Diesel looked hurt. "Your worthy Sir Topham Hatt thinks I need to learn. Oh, but he is mistaken. We Diesels don't need to learn. No, we know everything. We come to a yard and improve it. We are, how should I put it, revolutionary. Yes." "Oh, is that so?" said Duck. "Well, if you're rebel thingamany, perhaps you can collect my cars while I fetch Gordon's coaches." Diesel, delighted to show off, purred away. With much banging and clashing, he collected a row of freight cars. Duck left Gordon's coaches at the station and came back. Diesel was now trying to take some cars from a siding nearby. They were old and empty. Clearly, they had not been used for some time. Their brakes would not come off properly. Diesel found them hard to move. Pull, push, backwards, forwards. "Ow! Ow!" the cars groaned. "We can't! We won't!" Duck watched the operation with interest. Diesel lost his patience. "Grrr!" he roared and gave a mighty heave. The freight cars jerked forward. "Ow! Ow! Ow!" they screamed. "We can't! We won't! We can't! We won't!" Some of their brakes broke, and the gear hanging down bumped on the rails and sleepers. "We can't! We won't!" Their trailing brakes caught on the points and locked themselves solid. "Arrgh!" roared Diesel again. Suddenly, a rusty coupling broke, and he shot forward suddenly by himself. "Hoo-hoo!" chuckled Duck. Diesel recovered and tried to push the cars back, but they wouldn't move, and he had to give up. Duck ran quietly around to where the other freight cars all stood in line. "Thank you for arranging these, Diesel," he said. "I must go now." "Don't you want this lot?" "No, thank you." Diesel gulped. "And I have taken all this trouble?" he shrieked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You never asked," said Duck innocently. "Besides, you are having so much fun being whatever it is you said. Goodbye." Diesel had to help the workmen clear the mess. He hated it. All the coaches and cars were laughing. Presently, he heard them singing. Their song grew louder and louder, and soon it echoed through the yard.
Cars are waiting in the yard, tackling them with Diesel. Show the world what I can do. Gaily boost the Diesel. In and out, it creaks about like a big black weasel. When he pulls the rockers out, pop goes the Diesel.
"Ugh," growled Diesel, and scuttled away to sulk in the shed. Dirty work. When Duck returned and heard the freight cars singing rudely at Diesel, he was horrified. "Shut up," he ordered, and gave them a bump. "I'm sorry our cars were rude to you, Diesel." Diesel was still furious. "It's all your fault. You made them laugh at me," he complained. "Nonsense," said Henry. "Duck would never do that. We engines have our differences, but we never talk about them to the cars. That would be disgraceful," said Gordon. "Disgusting," put in James. "Despicable," finished Henry. Diesel hated Duck. He wanted him to be sent away, so he made a plan. He was going to tell lies about Duck. The next day he spoke to the cars. "I see you like jokes," he said in his oily voice. "You made a very good joke about me yesterday. I laughed and laughed. Yes. Duck told me one about Gordon. I'll whisper it. Don't tell Gordon I told you." And he sniggered away. Guffawed the cars. "Gordon will be cross with Duck when he knows. Let's tell him and pay Duck out for bumping us." Diesel went to all the sidings, and in each he told different stories. He said that Duck had told them all to him. Now this was untrue, but the freight cars didn't know or care. They laughed rudely at the engines as they went by. Soon Gordon, James, and Henry found out why. "Disgraceful," said Gordon. "Disgusting," said James. "Despicable," said Henry. "We cannot allow it." They consulted together. "Yes," they said, "he did it to us, so we will do it to him and see how he likes it." Duck was tired out. The cars had been cheeky and troublesome, and he had had hard work to make them behave. He wanted a rest in the shed. But the three engines barred his way and blew steam loudly at him while Diesel lurked from behind. "Keep out." "Stop fooling," said Duck. "I'm tired." "So are we," hissed the engines. "We are tired of you." "We like Diesel. We don't like you." "You tell tales about us to the cars." "I don't." "You do." "I don't." "You do." "Don't." "Do." Sir Topham Hatt came out to stop the noise. "Duck called me a galloping sausage," spluttered Gordon. "Rusty red scrap iron," hissed James. "I'm old square wheels," fumed Henry. "Well, Duck?" Duck considered. "I only wish, sir," he said gravely, "that I had thought of those names myself, if the dome fits." Sir Topham Hatt coughed. He made the cars laugh at us, accused the engines. Sir Topham Hatt recovered. He'd been trying not to laugh himself. Did you, Duck? Certainly not, sir. No steam engine would be as mean as that. Diesel lurked up. Now, Diesel, you heard what Duck said. I can't understand it, sir. To think that Duck, of all engines. I'm dreadfully grieved, sir. But I know nothing. No. I see. Diesel squirmed and hoped he didn't. I'm sorry, Duck, Sir Topham Hatt went on, but you must go to Edward's station for a while. I know he will be glad to see you. Beg pardon, sir. Do you mean now? Yes, please. As you wish, sir. Duck trundled sadly away, while Diesel smirked with triumph as he rolled back into the darkness. A close shave for Duck. Duck, the Great Western engine, puffed sadly to Edward's station. It's not fair, he complained. Diesel has been telling lies about me and made Sir Topham Hatt and all the other engines think I'm horrid. Edward smiled. I know you aren't, he said, and so does Sir Topham Hatt. You wait and see. Why don't you help me with these freight cars? Duck felt happier with Edward and set to work at once. He helped Edward with his cars and coaches and sometimes helped foreign engines by pushing their trains up the hill. But Gordon, James, and Henry never spoke to him at all. One day, Duck pushed behind a goods train and helped it to the top. The cars were silly, heavy, and noisy. The two engines had to work hard, pushing and pulling constantly. Beep, beep, whistled Duck. Goodbye. And he rolled gently over the crossing to another line. Duck loved coasting downhill, running easily with the wind whistling past. He hummed a little tune. Suddenly, he heard a conductor's warning whistle. That's strange, he thought. We haven't a conductor. His driver heard it too and looked back. Hurry, Duck, hurry! There's been a breakaway. Some cars are chasing us. There were 20 heavily loaded freight cars. Hurrah! 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 They laughed. We've broken away! We've broken away! And before the signalman could change the points, they followed Duck onto the down line. Chase him! Bump him! Down on the rails! They yelled and hurtled after Duck, bumping and swaying with ever-increasing speed. The conductor saved Duck. Though the cars had knocked him off his van, he got up and ran behind, blowing the whistle to attract Duck's driver's attention. Now what? Asked the fireman. As fast as we can, said the driver grimly. Then they'll catch us gradually. Hurry, Duck, hurry! They raced through Edward's station, whistling furiously. But the cars caught them with a shuddering jar. The fireman climbed back, and the van brakes came on with a scream. Braking carefully, the driver was gaining control. Another clear mile and we'll do it, he said. They swept round a bend. Oh, glory! Look at that! James with the passenger train was just pulling out on their line from the station ahead. Any minute, there could be a crash. The driver leapt to his reverser, hard over, full steam, whistle. It's up to you now, Duck, he said. Duck put every ounce of weight and steam he had against the cars. They felt his strength. On, they yelled. But Duck was holding them now. I must stop them! I must! The station came nearer and nearer. The last coach cleared the platform. It's too late! Duck groaned and shut his eyes. He felt a sudden swerve and slid shuddering and groaning into a siding. A barber had set up shop in a wooden shed in the yard. He was shaving a customer. Suddenly, there was a sliding, groaning crash, and part of the wall caved in. The customer jumped nervously, but the barber held him down. It's only an engine, he said calmly, and went on lathering. Beg pardon, sir, gasped Duck. Excuse my intrusion. No, I won't, said the barber crossly. Ye frighten my customers and spoil my new paint. I'll show you. And he lathered Duck's face all over. Poor Duck. Thomas was helping to pull the cars away when Sir Topham had arrived. The barber was telling the workmen what he thought. I do not like engines popping through my walls, he fumed. They disturb my customers. I appreciate your feelings, said Sir Topham Hatt, and will gladly repair the damage. But you must understand that this engine and his crew have prevented a serious accident. He paused impressively. It was a very close shave. You and many others might have been badly hurt. Oh, said the barber. Excuse me. He ran into his shop, fetched a basin with water, and washed Duck's face. I'm sorry, Duck. I didn't know you were being a brave engine. That's all right, sir, said Duck. I didn't know that either. You were very brave indeed, said Sir Topham Hatt kindly. I'm very proud of you, Duck. I shall tell City of Truro about you next time he comes. Oh, sir, said Duck. He felt happier than he had for weeks. Sir Topham Hatt then watched the rest of the rescue operation. Then he had more news for Duck. When you are properly mended and washed, you're coming home. Home, sir? Asked Duck. Do you mean the yard? Of course. But, sir, they don't like me. They like Diesel. Not now. I never believed Diesel. After you went, he went on to tell lies about Henry and the other engines. So I sent him packing with confirmation that he lied about you as well. The other engines are sorry and want you back. So, a few days later, when he came home shining with new paint, there was a really rousing welcome for Duck, the Great Western Engine.